Order. All of us are present, so we have established quorum. I apologize, Harry is absent. He'll be gone the next this meeting and the next one in February. So hopefully if all other members but one is present, we'll have quorum for those meetings. We have no cases on the agenda today, so we'll move on to communications. We have a guest with us today, Chuck Hammer from the Health Department. He's going to talk about subdivision regulations, and we'll get started with you, if you don't mind, Chuck. Okay. You can either, it looks like we do have it set up so you could sit at the table or you could stand up at the podium. It's up to you.
As long as I can advance the slides.
I think if you go over there, I think we can move the microphone
I think the
over.
microphone's already
Oh,
on
good.
the podium.
Okay.
Oh, this thing here?
Yeah. Brilliant.
Oh, yeah, that helps a lot.
Yeah.
You just deafened him in there.
I have this first slide up here about our local health department regulations. These sewage regulations were adopted by the Athens City County Health Department in October of 2007. They mirror a state regulation, a statewide sewage regulation that was adopted by the state of Ohio as a minimum in January of 2007. And there's a whole other story about that, but at this point we adopted those regulations in total, and that's what we're using, and we've used since October 1. And the reason that's relevant is there's a section in here that relates to subdivisions and new lots, and that's nothing new in our regulation. The copy of our old 1967 Athens County regulations, and there's a section in here that's deals with subdivisions and the creation of new lots and certain standards that would apply specifically because of sewage. Section 8.1, and I've blown up this one part here that says the Board of Health review required in paragraph D, and that refers to subdivisions, of this rule shall be coordinated as applicable with authorities having responsibility for the requirements established in Chapter 711 of the Revised Code. So that our rule obligates me to coordinate with planning commissions that have the authority with regard to subdivisions and lot splits. So that's really why I'm here, is I want to make this kind of a regular thing where I fulfill my obligations to our local regulation to continue this ongoing coordination with the planning commissions. I have, this is a really lousy slide, but I've got these handouts for you that this is a cut sheet that we hand out to people that are, if they're interested in what are the requirements of the health department. And I tried to capture all of our rule requirements and our policies as they've been developed in coordination with the planning commissions. We've worked very well together for many years, both at the Regional Planning Commission and the Athens City Planning Commission, and now, of course, with the Nelsonville Planning Commission having a 3-mile limit jurisdiction. We're trying to do the same thing with all these jurisdictions so that we can not have to shift gears and change the way we approach these from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. Anyway, you have a copy of that. What happens, people come to us with an idea that they want to split a property. We use the GIS maps to kind of peg that. So I've just indicated a case with a green arrow or the green star. We can use the GIS system on these maps to illuminate the 3-mile limit of Athens. I think this is an old 3-mile limit. This isn't a new 3-mile limit. And then, of course, Nelsonville now has a planning commission that's active, and we can define that area. Everything else is in the Regional Planning Commission jurisdiction. The planning commissions have the legal authority to grant or deny a lot split. The health department doesn't have that authority. The only reason we get into it is because the planning commissions in your rules say it has to have health department approval. So we get involved for that reason. And we found it to be a very fruitful partnership. So here's that same piece that was under that star. Again, we're using the GIS maps at this point, so we can pull up the map. The aerial photo with the roads in it, in this case, we can dress that up a little bit with north arrow and scale bars. The property that we're looking at is somewhat defined just by the land use, a row of trees, the way it's mowed, the way it's managed, manifests in differences that you can see in a photograph, but we can also put, this is a new 2007 photo, the 2003 photo, so we can toggle back and forth and look at possible differences in how that property was managed or developed over time. As we get more of these photographs, that becomes more and more useful. I've overlaid the lot lines in there. We can illuminate those lot lines so that we can, really focus in on the property at hand. In this particular case, there were a 6-acre piece of property, and there were 2 houses on it. The original house, and then a relative came to live nearby, so they could keep an eye on the person, and that person's now gone, so they're talking about splitting the property. Now, they might have an idea how they want to split that property right off the bat. And we consider that very carefully, but it does have to meet our basic requirements. We can overlay the 5-foot contour intervals on there so you get an idea of how the land lays. You can use these lines to calculate. Again, this is just at the desk on the computer. We can calculate percentage of slope and get a little bit better idea of the drainage. We can put in the creeks, just show where they lay, and some of the sub-drainages, and maybe the directionality can be indicated for our study. For the major creeks, we can buffer that line. So in this case, I've buffered that out 50 feet either side of the line. And the purpose for that is our statewide sewage regulations say you can't put a leach field in closer than 50 feet to a stream. So there now I've kind of illuminated with the green areas that might be useful for a leach field, because what we're really after on these is to identify resources on the property itself where you can establish an on-site sewage leach field. The days of discharging through a treatment system and into a drainage are over with on any kind of new construction. And we try to avoid creating any lots that don't have options to contain that sewage on the lot. Our rules and the cut sheet indicate that we want 1.5 acres of usable ground for leach fields on any new lot. Now, 1.5 acres is more than you need for a leach field, but if you create a lot with 1.5 acres of usable ground, it gives you options. You start to be able to say, well, I want to put the house here, or I want to build this kind of leach field or that kind of leach field. It gives you lots more options in developing a property. From that, we've put a more realistic suggestion on how that property can be split, as indicated by the red dotted line. So each side of that has 1.5 acres that's, we think, maybe could be used for a leach field based on the topography, the distance from the creek, that kind of a thing. There's also county soil maps, and the soil survey of Athens County is a published document that's reflected by these soil map units that are also available on the GIS system. It's kind of notoriously inaccurate. You can't really depend on a break of one soil to another on those published lines. but at least it gives you some idea, and it is a resource to give us a little more idea of is this suitable or is it not. Then we publish this in a on an 8.5 by 11 that we give to the person to explain, kind of summarize what our map review of that is. It's just a preliminary assessment of the site. Now, at that point, it sort of goes back to the property owner, the developer, to produce some additional data, provide us with additional data so we can complete the assessment. And I've indicated on the map these shovels crossed here would be where the homeowner would hire a contractor to do an assessment of the soil at that site. Now, back in the day, they used to do a thing called a percolation test, a perk test. And a perk test was a real on-site test where they'd go out and they'd dig a hole in the ground about 3 feet deep, and somebody would fill that hole with water, and then they'd stand there and watch it, and watch how quickly that water absorbed into the ground. And that was a performance test that was meant to indicate how that soil would perform in a leach field situation where you're discharging wastewater into the ground. Can it dissipate? There were a lot of problems with the perk test. It depended on who did the perk test, who recorded the data, who prepared the site, the time of year, whether it was frozen or saturated or dry. A lot of variables. It was a very imperfect measure of the performance of an actual leach field. Now we have a new approach to that, and I don't think I brought my papers on it, but there's a very specific protocol now for measuring what we refer to as the hydraulic conductivity of the soil for wastewater disposal. Instead of digging a hole in the ground and watching actual performance, you still dig a hole in the ground, but it's big enough for a person, a qualified person, to get into that hole and very meticulously record physical attributes of the soil from top to bottom. And so they look at such things as the soil texture and structure and consistence and the colors, and then whether they hit a limiting layer at various depths, and they record this on a piece of paper, and they can calculate from that table the hydraulic conductivity of that individual soil. And since those soil qualities change even across a yard, we require that there be 2 holes dug for each home site, and that data be recorded. And so that's what I've indicated as possible areas where, as the soil scientists, we have local contractors. There's 3 in Athens County, and there's about a dozen of them accessible to Athens County if people want to pay for them to come from various parts in the state that can perform these tests. We don't do that in-house. We don't have people qualified for it. We rely on qualified people in the private sector to provide that data to us. So the developer, the property owner, even in a situation where you have an existing house, we need that data for assurance of whether that site is appropriate when that leach field needs to be replaced in the future. So the soil scientist collects the data and then also provides us with a map of areas where on the contour these leach fields can be established. So that's just in the brown dotted lines are ideas of what a leach field might look like. So we've got multiple leach fields. Here's maybe one primary one for this house, and then a secondary leach field for this house. And here there's a couple of different options. And what we require on a new lot is that the leach field size be calculated based on a 4-bedroom house? Well, a lot of people aren't building a 4-bedroom house. They might be building a 2-bedroom cabin. But if we require right up front that that the property can accommodate a 4-bedroom, it allows for the possibility of expansion in the future. If somebody builds a one-room cabin and then sells it, and the next people add a room, and then they have a family and they add some more, we see this time and time again where the initial vision of how this property is going to be used doesn't pan out 20 years down the road. It's generally better to allow for more options with that lot. So that's what that's trying to show. And the other thing, we go out and we actually then visit the site. And what we're looking for when we visit the site are other environmental hazards. So I've put a couple of pictures here. Sometimes you don't see on the aerial photo maybe the tire dump out back, or it might be on a part of the property that really isn't the focus of the development, but it's there nonetheless. And we won't approve this until these hazards are removed. The other picture just shows a lot of junk, and some of that would be of a public health concern with the solid waste. We run into some pretty amazing things out there in terms of unhealthy situations. And one of the beauties of this process, where we're partnering with the Planning Commission, is we are talking to people that want to do something. They want to get this property split so they can sell it, or they can deed it to someone else. And we can address some of these environmental health problems that we find without using enforcement measures. We just say, well, we'll approve this, but you need to clean up the dump. Or remove maybe a derelict house or a structure that's really not healthy as you start dividing up property and creating neighborhoods. You really don't want those things there. Another situation, we might find an old stripped out trailer or some trash that is on the property that's being developed. So there's no, we got to go out and look at these to do our job correctly, and it's very helpful to get these things corrected. The other thing we look at is sewage systems, existing sewage systems. A lot of times they've failed. This is just a septic discharge. I'm sort of longing for the green grass here pretty soon, but it also brings out the sewage systems failing, and we see a lot of that. And we get a lot of these things corrected without having to take enforcement actions when it involves this lot split process, because they want to get it split. Here's what you have to do to comply with the regs and get that split. We get a lot of these things corrected. Another thing we look at are water wells. On the left is an old dug well, and you can look down in there and you can see that laid up rock in there, where it's probably about 2.5 feet around. And they tried to do some improvements, but that's a kind of a well that is not sanitary. You can't really make it safe and potable. So that would be an example of a kind of a water system we would identify and say, this, you have to properly abandon this. The one on the right is was an old well that had a casing, a proper casing, and it was grouted properly, but it was a buried seal. The old way of doing the wells was a buried seal, where the well was just out there somewhere in the yard, and the top of the casing there was a proper seal on it, but they tended to degrade. So those have been replaced by a device called a pitless adapter. So here what they've done is they've dug down and they've welded an extension onto the well casing, brought it up above ground level, about 8 inches above the ground level, and they've installed a pitless adapter here. So instead of the buried seal, there's a more sanitary connection to the water supply down below the frost line. So that's what that's all about. Anyway, we look at these things. We want to see that these things are identified, corrected if necessary, so that we can move on with the development of any piece of land in a reasonable manner. Here's just an example of a piece of property that only had one house on it. And the proposal was to split off, some of the land here. We would subject that to the same standards, the same kind of scrutiny, so that we'd identify what areas were kind of off limits for sewage systems and what was available, and proceed from there. Here's an example of a piece of property that was recently submitted to us. It's not in the 3-mile limit of Athens, but it's good for an example. The whole acreage is only 2 acres. So to split that wouldn't meet our 1.5 acre rule anyway, at all. But we still, try to explain to people why we are doing what we're doing. So we'll even review these and try to come up with an explanation to the client of, what's the problem with this and why it shouldn't be split or can't be split. In this case, they wanted to split off just a little piece there with this house that had been built on the side. So I put in the drainage ways. This drainage way is just a ditch, so it's not really a stream, but this was a major stream, a tributary perennial stream. And there's the topographic 5-foot contour intervals. And then right there, put the 50-foot buffer from that stream. And it overwhelms the proposed lot. There's really no way in the world to even think about replacing that sewage system. And the question with this particular kind of a lot is, well, everything's there already. What's the problem just splitting it off? We can, it's already there. And my view of this from a public health standpoint is that this is a planning disaster, really, that this shouldn't have been developed in such a way. And so I, kind of refer to these as train wrecks in terms of planning. And so we'll have a graphic here. And, and no matter how exquisite the train wreck is, and how compelling the argument is, it really doesn't do any good to then sell off pieces of it and have multiple ownership of that, what's a bad system. The other side is that, I got another picture here. If you have a train wreck situation and one person controls it, then they have an opportunity much more efficiently to correct that situation. So maybe that would involve de-developing it, removing of that house site from that lot, or just managing it carefully, and then instead of having this one owner looking across the creek and being angry about the sewage discharging in there, he owns that, and he's looking at that and saying, well, I can control that because I'm renting that. I can tell people they can't have a washing machine in there, or there's things that can be done that's more efficient if one person owns that poorly planned and developed lot. Now, at the point where public sewers go into these areas, then we solve a lot of these problems. But we've enjoyed a partnership with the planning commissions at the health department for many years, and I just wanted to bring this. I hope this has been helpful or interesting or entertaining anyway. It's one area where the health department's doing some planning directly with the planning commissions that's been very, very helpful for what we do, and I hope you would concur, and I want to continue, but I'd like you to look at some of these standards that we have in place, and let me know if you've got problems with those, or if there's things that should be changed. Or other ways that we can make this partnership more fruitful for both the Planning Commission, the Health Department, and ultimately, of course, for the people of Athens County as we're developing these neighborhoods.
Mr. Mayor?
So everything you're telling me right now is that I think most houses out there at one point were all using aerators or a septic container with an aerator, and those are no
Not
longer.
always,
Well-
but it was a very popular
Method,
system
yeah.
that was used for years. We always preferred a septic tank with a leach field,
Okay.
some kind of leach field. But quite frankly, for many years at the health department, we didn't have the tools to properly assess the ground and put in leach fields that were working good.
Mhm.
So they often failed prematurely, sometimes very quickly. And because of that, and we recognized that internally, when the aerator came along and it was approved for discharge into the drainage ways and public rights of way, we put in an awful lot of them. Now, the state law requires that any new construction or any replacement system utilize an on-site approach, so some kind of leach field, and that can be a real simple leach field with trenches on the contour, or it could be something more elaborate like a mound system or a drip irrigation system. We are encouraging through these planning steps to create lots that can put in standard leach fields because they're the cheapest, they're the most reliable, they're the easiest to maintain. If you start going to mound systems or drip irrigation, they're expensive to design, they're expensive to install, they're expensive to run, and they're very expensive to replace. So we don't want, for our part, to be creating lots that the only option that person has is to put in some elaborate high-tech sewage system. So that's part of the reason why we maybe overdo it a little bit in terms of requiring lots of space for leach fields. It gives people options for one, and it encourages that we would have these lower cost sewage systems installed that are more reliable and better public health policy.
Okay, a couple things. Some of the examples you showed us here were actually houses that were built and trying to split the lot after the fact. So in terms of somebody building a house, there's no real permitting system out in the county per se, is there? Or
Well,
if I decide to
yeah.
put that extra house on my lot, and then, the only time you're talking about is when the split occurs.
Yeah,
or,
well, we would be involved if, when they build the new house, every individual home is supposed to have its own separate sewage system if there's no public sewer available. So there is a permitting requirement for an application and a permit to install a sewage system. So we do have a level of control there, but that is more of a project, a permit to install a particular project. So for example, somebody has a piece of property and they want to put a 2-bedroom house on there. They've already got a 3-bedroom house that maybe the mom and dad live in, and one of the kids wants to build a house over on another part of the property. Well, we would go out, we would require that they submit the soil assessment data and that they come up with a plan and that there be room for the sewage system and a complete area to replace that on suitable soil. So we would pretty much, make sure that all happened, but it would just be for the project, the 2-bedroom house. Now, if they come to split that later on, we would say, well, do you now have enough room to expand those leach fields to accommodate a 4-bedroom house? That would be the standard we would apply as the lot was being created. But yeah, just developing on the piece of property, the only permit would be the permit to install required for the sewage system for that particular project.
Okay.
So the 1.5 acres, is that the whole lot, or is that just the amount needed for the leach beds?
That's the amount we want to see that much ground that's usable for the leach bed.
And you're talking about having one leach bed and then possibly a second if that one were to fail,
Yes.
enough space.
And that's been a standard requirement for 50 years.
Okay.
In the rules.
And the city has representation on the Regional Planning Commission. Harry's on it, Paul Logue is on it, I'm on it, and Chris Fowle from the Planning and Development Committee of the City Council.
Okay.
So we have 4 members who are at least coordinating with the
Right.
Regional Planning Commission. When does your jurisdiction stop? I know there was some conversation about when the EPA gets involved. Is that for the commercial developments, or
Yeah.
and what is that?
Our permit authority is, of course, within the boundaries of Athens County,
Mhm.
and it's for 1 to 4 family dwelling, that's EPA. A church or a grocery store or a convenient store or a little factory or, commercial operation would be EPA.
Mm.
But they are basically after the same thing now. They're not discharging off the lot on any new permits. They are favoring both the assessment protocol that we're looking at. They look at the same data, and they design these things so that they contain the sewage in some kind of a leach field.
2 other questions. I
ahead.
don't want to, take over all this time. One is I noticed for the 3-mile area for Nelsonville, it actually goes into Hocking County. So their problem, of course, is talking to the Hocking County Health Department, I assume, as well. So they have to coordinate between 2 counties. I assume that works.
Yeah.
Okay. The other one is, I know there's been discussion about us extending our sewage treatment out to the county, going towards the west. Do you have any opinions or caveats that you need to express on that, or just wait and see, or what?
Well, anytime public sewers can be extended out into areas that are currently covered by septic tanks and aerators, it's a good thing. And we're doing these planning steps now with the idea that these lots will be able to support on-site sanitary disposal of wastewater from those homes for a long, long time, for generations, hopefully. That hasn't always been the case. The planning hasn't happened with that sort of care, I guess, into the future. And so we have a lot of areas in Athens County where there's a very dense, a lot of houses really close together. They're all served by individual home sewage disposal systems. Those are cared for by the individual homeowners and tenants, and that that doesn't always work out too good. And so when something starts to go wrong, which there's many of them that are for various reasons, they reach their usable life, there's maintenance that's not being done properly on the systems, and they're discharging septic effluent out into the neighborhoods, and it pollutes the waterways, and it causes nuisances in the neighborhood, and smells and bad feelings between neighbors, and there's lots of problems. We see it all the time. So I'm an advocate for 2 things. One, extend those public sewers wherever we can, because it solves a multitude of problems. And then the other side of that is we're not going to get public sewers out in certain areas of the county for many years, or maybe ever. So we need to be trying to establish systems that we have every reason to believe are going to work for a long time. And I think we're getting there. And this is part and parcel of that, is planning these lots very carefully and thoroughly. Our planning is all data-based. We're not, we've removed a lot of the, oh gosh, I think it'll work kind of stuff. We've got data that shows how the soils will perform, and that we've got resources available. Now, somebody can always ruin it. We can, approve a lot and go through all these steps and all the assurances and allow that survey to be recorded, so then it's a marketable piece of property, and the next owner can come and bring in a bulldozer and destroy all those resources very quickly and easily. So there's still it's still somewhat tenuous. So that's why I like the public sewers, because
Okay.
it's a hard infrastructure that that doesn't depend on on-site resources to deal with the wastewater in a sanitary and responsible way.
Okay. That's all my questions.
Question?
I'm just kind of curious, your opinion of the county commission. Are they working in a direction that you would like to see, or is there something that the city of Athens can do more with the county in terms of policy and procedures?
Nothing that, leaps out in my mind. I think, the coordination between the planning commissions has been very close. And I think there's no big disconnect between the Regional Planning Commission and the way they approach this and support public health and the city planning commissions. The county commissioners have been supportive in terms of, taking on projects to extend public sewers, and both the city administration, the planning commissions, the county have been very supportive in my tenure of public health practices. So there's always little things here and there. We pursued, for example, or advocated for large lot subdivision rules, and those didn't happen. Well, it's not a disaster. It was just another level of oversight for development of properties in these, because what are at the planning commission, the limit to the authority is the 5 acres. Anything over 5 acres, if it has road frontage, and there's no easements involved, is for the most part would be outside of the jurisdiction of the planning commission. Now, we would still have jurisdiction on the permits for issuing permits for actual installations, and there's some planning that goes on there, because again, we're looking into the future. We don't want these wastewater systems put in for these individual homes and then just walk away from it without the assurance that these are going to have a fighting chance of doing the job they need to do to protect public health for many, many years down the road. So.
Okay, I have one last question, unless you've got more.
No.
And again, you're both the city, county, health department. Are there any boards and commissions that need to be filled? Are you doing okay with our end of our activities?
Yeah, we're good right now. We have a vacancy in it's a county appointment.
Okay, I just want to make sure we've got everything covered.
No, Dr. Nelson and Dr. Woodworth are representing the city on the Board of Health, and I couldn't ask for better board members.
Okay.
I just have one follow-up question with the large acre lot. Is there any possibility of having, I saw your last study where there definitely wasn't enough space for a leach bed, but where you could group the development and then have more, group, I guess, the area in a lot where you have development, but then you have other space within it to put the leach beds in, where, you could have the houses near each other.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, that would be fine. Now, the problem with that is, per our mandate in the regulations, you can't commingle the wastewater from 2 separate dwellings.
Okay.
Now, if you have a duplex, you can, a 2-family dwelling, you can have one system.
Okay.
If you have 2 separate houses, you're supposed to have 2 separate systems. And, we could kind of argue the pros and cons of that, but there could be a situation where you had one piece of property with a cluster of homes, and then the area where wastewater was dealt with would be in another area, but we would have to keep them separate. And, like I said, there's probably pros and cons to that approach. But we're the only way you can legally have 2 homes going into one system is with a permit from the EPA. So the EPA has issued a couple of those in Athens County where we had 2 homes on one piece of property, and they wanted to keep the sewage all in one unit, and they got permit from the EPA. So it's possible to do it.
I had one more. How's Amesville doing with their interesting
They
sewage?
have a new, of course, they have a relatively new sewage system. It was very innovative. It was the first in the state of Ohio, where an existing village used this decentralized model, where they, instead of having one central sewage plant, they have several different nodes where the sewage is collected and treated. It's treated through a system where there are there's tanks at each of the house, septic tanks. So there's a little bit of, filtering out the big chunks, so to speak, at those individual houses. Maybe 2 houses going into one tank, and then the lines, smaller diameter lines carrying just that overflow from the septic tanks goes to a larger tank that's metered onto a filter system. It's a fabric type of a filter, and then that discharges through a ultraviolet light disinfect, and then goes into the Federal Creek in 3 different spots. And they've been very successful with that. It's meeting the requirements of the EPA in terms of the discharge quality, which is a high standard for a community system. It's meeting those characteristics, and it's working really good. It looks like Coolville is going to adopt a similar system, and we're in the process of seeing them apply for the permits and get that installed over there. It put Athens County on the map as being innovative. It's a lot cheaper than a centralized system. To have this decentralized system, the management of it is a lot simpler. So it's good. I'd like to see more of those. I'd like to see some of those in some of the unincorporated villages. Amesville and Coolville have their own village government, but there's a lot of old villages in Athens County that are in dire need of this kind of proper sewage treatment. And they're unincorporated. They're just part of the township. So Guysville, Stewart, Shade, Millfield, a lot of different unsewered areas. It'd be nice to see that model taken one step further and somehow serving some of these unincorporated areas where people are really densely packed in, have lots of sewage problems. And we can't, through these types of systems that we have the permit authority for, we can't solve the problem in those villages.
Would that be on the township level then? I mean, if it's not incorporated, who would be the responsible party?
Yeah, they're part of the township.
Okay.
That's the first line of government that they have. And so it would either be the township or county. It could be at the county level where the county adopted a...
I remember a couple of years ago some kind of technology talking about spraying out the sewage in terms of digested. I think it was a torch. I remember some kind of development. That never came to fruition, I assume?
Well, they never built it.
Yeah.
And there was
Okay.
also a proposal to put a similar system out of Walnut Acres, which was an old platted subdivision from way back
Okay.
at Baker Road and Bradford Road.
Hmm.
And what that was is there were, the individual homes, they had septic tanks. Again, it was permitted by the EPA. Went to a central collection area where the sewage went in. I'm simplifying this, but it went into a lagoon, an open pond.
Mm-hmm.
And then that pond was sort of the reservoir to hold this, stabilize it. And there was some amount of evaporation, but it was then metered onto a suitable area where it was sprayed, irrigated onto an area, an off-limits area, to dispose of it.
It didn't happen, okay.
It didn't happen
Okay, just
in
wondered.
either area. So.
And one more, just I
Go
don't know
ahead.
if it's to Chuck or to the mayor. I know there's been a long-standing desire among some people to develop the Albany-Athens corridor more towards business. Would the city of Athens ever be linked directly into county projects or service directly some of the areas around like Bradford Road, things like that?
That's part of the discussion that's been going on. I mean, there's a Stilson study, which I have yet to see. I think, is that?
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
not fun.
I forget the name of it. And that's looking at, it's very preliminary. I guess the county commissions have talked about it. That was a question I asked Chuck about actually extending our system out there to cover that need. And part of a comprehensive plan talks about development there. And really what we talk about is extending our sewer lines outside the city limits. And then it becomes a policy issue. Do we want to do that or not? I know the council wants to discuss it a little bit further along the way as well.
I have a question. When you're, once a secondary septic site has been established or on a lot, from that point forward, is there any requirements that you cannot build there, you can't put a pole barn up or a garage or anything on that site, which would null and void the potential to install septic down the road?
Well, especially with these new lots where we're really requiring that the resources are available more really in excess of what they need, even for that secondary replacement area. If somebody did that, with this plan, we can't go in there and say, oh, wait a minute, you can't do that, here's a stop work order, we can't do that. Mm-hmm. But by doing this planning up front, if somebody does that, there's probably going to be another option for them. Now, that other option might have all of a sudden gotten very expensive. Maybe they've ruined their area for a normal leach field and they have to put a mound system in. So it's kind of shooting themselves in the foot if they do that. Mm-hmm. But we rely on, trying to get this information to people when they develop or when they when they buy into they have a house with a home sewage disposal system, that these things don't last forever. They need to be repaired or replaced, and that's the designated area. And so we kind of rely on that information being there so that they don't make poor choices about how they manage the property. But we don't have any control specifically over that use of that property. It's just basically a requirement that's set aside, but we don't have any teeth in that. It's just recommending that they leave it alone so it's available.
All right. Any other questions from the commissioners?
I'd just like to add
John?
that we discussed at the last meeting the number of lot splits that came through here, and we only had one. But as you can see on the sheet I just handed you, that we did have 10 lot splits within the 3 mile last year, and that although only one of them went through here, 9 others were greater than 5 acres, or they were continuous and contiguous, which does not require it to come through the Planning Commission. But in every instance, I did work with Mr. Hammer in having Bob Eichenberg in our office has been very helpful as well, and many a times we'll sit down and go through them with him as well. And the county auditor site is worked with us very nicely as well, that anybody comes in and tries to record a piece of property on a split or anything that doesn't have the signatures from us or from Mr. Hammer, they just will not record it, and they call us on every application that comes through. So we've got a pretty good system worked out that at least gets reviewed properly on any split. So it's working out nicely.
Good. All right, thank you. If there's not any other questions, I do appreciate you coming out, Chuck Hammer, to explain that to us. It's always helpful.
I'd be happy to do it annually, or even maybe not to such an extent, but it helped me fulfill my requirements for our regulations.
Yeah, I mean, and a lot of times when it comes to us, it's all that's already been done. So it's nice to see what sort of takes place on the part of the health department. We're not familiar with that sort of data gathering that is done on your office's behalf. So thank you. There's not any other discussion on that.
Does Bob want to add anything?
Mr. Bob Eichenberg, I did see you were in attendance today. I thought maybe you just wanted to see what the planning commission is about, but is there anything you wanted to add?
There is a support person, and that was thorough enough.
Okay.
I appreciate it. I did see that next under communications, internet cafes, I heard there was maybe a map put together. Is that correct?
Yeah. Go if you want. Thank you, Bill. I know there's some information I gave 2 weeks
You
ago.
don't need to say it.
What I did here was, we were talking about how we might do something, and everything we were discussing was basically suggesting that if we're going to address
Thank you.
internet cafes through the zoning code, that a good model was already established when the city adopted zoning regulations specific to sexually oriented business use about 3 or 4 years ago. And it's a similar situation where it has limitations, distance requirements based upon churches, schools, residential districts, historic neighborhoods, libraries, etc. And so what I did was just put together a map using the same standards that are in our current code for sexually oriented businesses to show where something may be able to be permitted based upon zoning. And the sexually oriented businesses, they are only permitted in B3s, M zones, and in planned unit developments. And then there are distance requirements among that. And so what you could see on the map I created is sexually oriented businesses are permitted in this area of East State Street, a small area on West Union.
Is this the dark blue?
No, it's the brown.
Yeah, anything that's in the brown or the
Brown,
purple.
okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
any-
brown and the purple, I see, okay. Oh,
Any of those
B3,
blues,
right.
reds, and oranges would be areas where they could not be done.
Okay.
And then the brown is B3 and the purple is in manufacturing zone, okay?
Okay.
So you've got a portion of East State, a portion of far East State Street beyond where the bypass, or beyond Hope Drive, a small part on West Union, and then a small part on Columbus Road towards the highway. And so if we were just using identical regulations for distance, et cetera, this is how, or potential sites, if that makes any sense to you.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think the regulations I had given in the past, or last 2 weeks ago, that were recommendations, most of those only had 500-foot distance requirements. The cities for sexually oriented businesses are 1,000-foot. And I assume that's probably because we've got residential very close to commercial districts. And so you wanted to have a little bit more. And also cities have to tailor these to make sure that you're not zoning something out of existence at all. And so some cities, they may have had to go with 500-foot or 300-foot distance requirements to make it work.
Okay. The north side of East State Street, that B3 zone, that's not impacted by, didn't we acquire property for the park area many years ago there? Or?
We did, but we never annexed it in.
I see.
Yeah.
So if it's
So
not
I
annexed-
excluded anything that was not within the city limits. So Sells Park, the Riddle Preserve, the Hawkwoods Preserve, any of those are outside the city
Okay.
limits.
So they don't apply. That's what I was just asking. Okay.
And when we adopted this regulation, there was a question with sexually oriented businesses. I found in the minutes a discussion as to whether the bike path as a whole was a park, and it was decided that no, if we treated it as such, there'd be next to nothing that we could zone in for sexually oriented businesses.
Correctly, this was tabled last meeting. So the next question comes, how do we want to start? Do we want to start rolling again, or do we need more information, or?
I think we'd still want to have some more information. I mean, I think I'd like Harry to be here for these discussions as
Okay.
well.
I'd like to go ahead and see the draft, if we're going to wait for Harry, so that it's ready in March, that we could show whether it be Section 13 or what we're going to put in here and have it ready.
And the other issue I would point out is that a lot of cities addressed it only in their business code. And if the planning commission or if city council thinks that it only needs to be in the business code, then at the planning commission level, we don't even have to address
Right.
it. The planning commission may just say, we don't think it's needed here, handle it in business code and we can move on.
I felt like we were leaning towards that at the last meeting as well, but Mayor, go ahead.
But it doesn't mean we can't,
Right. Right. Sexually oriented businesses are addressed in both
Right.
zoning and business code.
okay. But it doesn't mean we can't draft something to recommend to council, even in the business area title, chapter. It's not our purview, but.
We can, yeah,
Okay.
or you can, sure.
Okay. So you're saying we should see if we can put something together draft-wise? I'd be a start.
Yes. Other than now, we're back to the question, are we going to address it in two areas, or are we just going to address it in the business? So we
Right.
can then submit as a recommendation. So. We can put it on for that first meeting in March.
Okay. I think that's a good idea. I mean, I guess we could approach it, like you said, if it's a B3 and we add item 13 to that. Gambling-oriented businesses that are not seen by the state as gambling.
Is there a reason why, if I may ask, why the planning commissioners think it should only be in business code and not in zoning? Just, I'm curious about.
I think
We
because it's
permit
such
all kinds
a...
of businesses within our zoning code and have them as permitted uses in zoning codes, and so why would we exclude this type of a business from zoning, but we include so many other businesses in zoning? I'm just curious about having that discussion.
I think it's such a hard thing to identify what it is the problem. I mean, I think we could group this thing in there and then they're just going to change the name. You know,
Okay.
so say we say internet cafes, oriented businesses, now all of a sudden it's a, martini bar that has gambling or something. I mean, I think the reason they're called that is because they were trying to sidestep some other regulation.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's my main issue I have with
They
it.
change the name if still the nature of the business remains the same.
Right.
I think we have a case still pending on that one. don't we?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. For the nightclub, sexual-oriented businesses. So
Right.
that's, maybe we need to have it in both zoning and business.
Right, yeah. And that would be definitely a good reason to do so. I think that's my main issue, though, is just what do we call it so it actually captures it now and in the future.
So it's really just a question of definitions.
Yeah, yeah. For me, it is. I don't want to speak for all of us, but
I would probably lean to putting it in both. I probably, in terms of the speed and how fast it would go through the business chapter,
Yeah,
would
that's
be
true.
more effective, quicker. But whether we should do both, we
well,
might want to.
the city council still would have to approve on us amending B3 zoning. So
Yes.
I guess a question I have is, I'm not even sure how, but who regulates the business code? Is that our code enforcement office, or is that the auditor's office? Okay. And so we might even have a situation where somebody comes in for permits to just remodel something, and John can't even, if they may not reveal what they're doing there. And so we may actually permit something, and then it goes in, and the auditor finds out after the fact. And so we might have, I guess, putting it in zoning, in my mind, would just be another level of
right.
control
Oversight.
on the
Well,
situation.
would you suggest that it's sweepstakes-oriented business, or sweepstakes seems like such a non-definition or something like that, that it seems like they could easily alter what that
Let
is.
them just stay with gambling.
Well, the state says it's not gambling, so that's
Yeah.
how can we define it as a gambling-oriented when that is outlawed in the state?
Well, I think some of these communities that I provide information on 2 weeks ago, they had pretty clear definitions included
Okay,
to control it. Now, again, there's, any regulation that's ever been written, there's always somebody trying to figure out how can they get around it
all right,
to profit for their own use. And so there's always going to be errors that happen down the road.
okay. We'll just,
We see that with our current zoning. There's always somebody trying to figure out a way to get around it. So, but
okay, well, let's table it for March, and, I mean, we can, I guess, go over, try to figure out what sort of definition we can put in place if we are going to add it to our B3 zoning.
How about trying to put a draft together for March? Maybe
Okay.
put a draft the next meeting. That's
Okay.
okay.
I would be.
I mean, that gives us a chance to at least look at it twice.
Right.
When Harry comes through in March.
Okay, let's do that. Since we are running late in our meeting, we'll table discussion as well on the strategic planning. That's again something I do want Harry at least to put in his 2 cents on. We'll move on to our reports from the planner and development at code enforcement.
Yeah, I just have a couple things. I won't keep you too much longer. We did receive, on January 28th, the Service Safety Director did receive an email from AT&T, actually requesting information on locations for cell towers.
Thank you, Paul.
And we thought we should just share that information with the Planning Commission. So the Planning Commission would like to work on that. That's another situation where if cell towers are going to be looked at as a separate title and not put in zoning code, if the Planning Commission would rather just allow City Council to work on it on their own, I'd be happy to work with the Planning and Development Committee on City Council to establish that. But from my perspective, we're seeing people asking for this information, and I do think it's important that if the Planning Commission wants to be involved with that we should be working on it. So,
Okay.
and Paula, I don't know if you had any further communication with the requestor.
I haven't, other than they've really defined their areas that they're looking at, and I get the impression that this is just the first of many to come.
Okay.
And they've identified these. I'm going to speak with OU about it, to make sure we have a unified front in terms of placement of towers. Because as you see, you can see how close it backs up here to that residential area on the far west side.
And 150, if I remember, requires a light, right? Over
I
100.
think anything above 150.
Yeah. So they're right at the edge of it.
Right.
And this property looks like it's in the valley, really. So I'm
Right.
Is
surprised.
that close to the west side, the west school?
Well, Athens
Down
Gardens,
behind
yes.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're actually down to our recreational area,
Mhm.
West State.
Okay. Sounds like we need
So
to get on that
basically,
soon.
yes,
Yeah,
that's-
sounds
I
like
think
that
that's
has to
what-
come back.
Sooner than later.
All right, well then, we should have that come back for our next meeting,
Okay.
the cell phone towers.
See, we're doing strategic planning anyway.
See, we're going to get away from this.
And so, when I spoke with I was actually from Burgess and Nyepel on behalf of AT&T. I asked about co-locating, and there doesn't seem to be any interest,
Huh.
So they're talking about, the technology's changed and what have you, and it may be that it's a cheaper fix to put up a new tower than to go through what
Share.
they have to do to co-locate, so.
As far as other issues, we did, planning commissioners should all have copies of Mr. Farian's planned unit development proposal. We distributed all that information to city staff for code and public works to review it, police and fire, et cetera, and I'm slowly getting that information back. I should have everything wrapped up ideally by next week.
Were there major alterations to that? Or?
Not that I've seen yet, no. Police and fire both gave some relatively standard things. Chief Troxel and I took out rulers and measured out some things to make sure fire trucks could fit through to meet his standards, and he was okay with that. Public Works did provide me with a detailed review this morning. I have not had a chance to look at it yet, though.
But to answer your question, yes, there were alterations to the last time he was here. He did do stacked parking underneath both buildings, and I think he's only 7 parking spaces short versus the 22 that he was before.
How many is he short?
7, I
Seven,
believe it
okay.
is. And the orientation of one of the buildings is different now as well, so.
Your plans that that Charlene mailed to you are
Are
current
current, yeah.
to what we're reviewing as well.
No, so not the ones we got mailed, though.
The ones that you were mailed
Just-
are accurate to what
Right.
Mr.
Oh,
Farian is
the one-
working
okay.
with today, yeah.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
what we're reviewing the same plans.
And the plans are closer to, I guess, the development that we were pointing towards on that?
Yes,
Mhm.
yeah. He took your recommendations, and he did receive a variance last week from the Board of Zoning Appeals. I have copies of the American Planning Association Commissioner for you that I'll distribute out once we're complete tonight.
Okay.
And I also have a set of plans for the Oxbow Bridge, which will be the conceptual plans that the city will be working on in 2012. And I believe there's going to be a public meeting on
Yeah,
that.
what is it? It's February 9th, next Wednesday, I guess it is, 4 to 5:30 at City Hall front conference room. So the plans will be there, and there'll be public input, time for public
It's
input.
not necessarily plans, there's some artist renderings
Oh.
of what we've
Yeah, these are
looked
just
at.
conceptual, but
Yes.
We're still about a year,
them.
a good full year away from the whole process.
That's all I have.
Thank you.
And we're working with OU on this quite closely.
Correct.
Ms. Paskey?
I already passed out the request that you asked for at the last meeting in regards to the planning commission cases. Shar was absolutely correct on the 5 Title 41s and the 1 lot split, as I already discussed. A little puzzled on that last time what the number of lot splits, as I just showed you, and we'd already talked about that there were 10 of them that did come through in the last year, but only 1 that came through here. And also, you asked for some research on the number of BZA cases over the past 5 years and what percentage of those were parking related. As you can see, I did a breakdown on all the cases and what they were in regards to through the past 5 years, and you can see 35% of the cases are parking related. So,
And I think there's probably a synopsis in your reports of how many were actually approved by the BZA.
I can do that. I didn't do it here. Yeah, that's a good one. I'll look into that too.
Okay, and the other thing, of course, to think about is, I know that I've been approached by at least one member or two occasionally saying a reorientation of how it works, I guess, which is probably a Pat Lang thing, I guess.
Right. So I will look into that. And then also, I did already email you. I'll give you a copy, hard copy here. We did finish up the sign meeting agenda last Thursday evening, I believe it was. And I sent them an email, just let them know when they're ready to come forward. So that's where we're at with that.
I do have one question on the total lot split, and that only 1 was submitted to the planning commission, and then that the other 9 were either greater than 5 acres or continuous or contiguous. What is continuous or contiguous?
Means if you have, the lots are under 5 acres, if you have 2 property owners that are side by side, that this property owner here is willing to transfer an acre to this property owner for whatever reason, and the remaining parcel over
Okay,
here
so
is
if it's
still
just a
greater than.
transfer.
Yeah, it's a transfer, but we make sure that what he transfers, the remaining parcel is still the 1.5 acres that
Right.
Mr. Hammer was discussing, and that the party's transferring doesn't have that guy's current septic system on it.
Okay.
So.
Yes.
It doesn't become a standalone parcel, it's tied to
That's
the
what I
Right.
was trying to figure out, what the
It'll always be
continuous.
tied to the parcel,
the other one.
that-
Okay.
the property, yeah.
Oh, thank you. Any questions for planner? Director? Okay. Well, thank you both. Opportunities for citizens to speak? No? Okay. Announcements and other business. Our first announcement is that the next meeting is going to be scheduled for Thursday as opposed to the Wednesday on February the 17th. It will be at noon, so just the day following when we typically meet. That is to arrange for some people's schedules. Any other announcements or other business? Disposition of last week's minutes. Has everyone had a chance to review minutes for the last meetings? I should say, not last week. It's a pretty big meeting. Make a motion that we approve the meeting
I'll
minutes.
second. RJ second.
RJ seconds.
Yeah.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, I will now adjourn the meeting. Thank you.
Okay, great.